Okay, good morning or afternoon, I think, about now. Okay, we are going to be, Carol Adams and I are going to be talking about working with transgender youth and their families, pandemic and post-pandemic. There's been and this is interesting, this is really the first time that we're talking about it in this sense, because through the pandemic, there was a huge surge of clients coming to us with the issue of transgender or gender identity and all the associated things with it. And I think it's going to be a really big issue for Minors Council. That's why I included it. And I think it's going to be a big issue for mental health for those of us, because I do a lot of court work, and just within the last 2 months, I have 3 cases, and that's a unusual amount of that kind of specific case within such a short period of time, and we're also bringing it to Minors Council, because what a surprise, this gives us one more platform for alienating parents to work with, which is where Minors Council is going to be heavily involved. And I do want to make a statement at the beginning. This presentation is not meant to really educate you to the degree you need to be educated on working with transgender youth. I have trouble saying that word. It's really just our point in doing this was to give everyone a base of just understanding, actually terminology, because a lot, and this sounds biased because it is biased, a lot of Minors Council are older, okay? A lot of us therapists are older, and my experience was earlier this year that some of the attorneys I'm working with were not really up to date on what it meant, and kids were saying things, and parents, and they're like, "What is this? What's non-binary?" And so this is more just trying to get everyone on a base of understanding. It's not whether it's a good or bad thing. It's a thing. It's what we're doing, and if at another time we could have Jill Hingston or someone come that can talk more in depth about the specifics of what happens with treatment and all, but in this case we're just really talking about getting familiar with it and how to look at it as Minors Council. Virginia.
I just have two things. One is that I will want your input on this at some point, but when children come in and talk about the issue, whatever words or stuff they use, I try to emphasize that they just stay open, and rather than fixating in their mind exactly what label they want or whatever. No, they're different, and work with it, because there's been so much indication later that sometimes operations are done or when they shouldn't be, and so forth. So I try to keep them fluid. It also makes it better in terms of the conflict they may be having with one or more of their parents about it. And then the other thing I wanted to add was, I think that this area overlaps with cultural backgrounds and so forth.
Yes.
Because how there's a real difference depending on your background in terms of how you're going to react to that kind of a presentation by a child.
Right. Well, and what you bring up is a little bit, I'm hoping to focus on and help people deal with, and it's where Minors Council is really important, is we do have children, and I'll talk about in a second, coming in, and you are not going to budge them. They have bought in. This is the way it is. They're 12 years old, and they know it, and this is what it's going to be, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's what
but they're supported in that viewpoint through many of the websites. There's an issue of social contagion that goes on with this. And so, and that's really something I really want this presentation to be able to help people understand, is that, as Minors Council, you're not going to be making the decision whether the kid has hormone therapy or not, or does surgery, but you may be influential in dealing with the state laws that we have and helping the parents deal with it, because the children are not always being given a broad view or an accurate view. I mean, we do not allow 11 or 12 or 13-year-old children to make lifelong decisions in any other area. We do not allow that. We say, you've got a parent. You know, you can't go get a tattoo if you're under 18 without parental consent, right? And nobody has an issue with that. We're like,
You get your ears pierced.
yeah.
And, I wonder also, you said something that makes me think about it, that the fact that there was so much in-home schooling put them all, on computers, and whether that, that ability or that predilection to become more rigid also was aggravated by
Absolutely.
so much in-house schooling.
Well, absolutely. I mean, just, I'll come back to our slide in a second, but just to jump ahead for a second, I had 3 kids come in during pandemic time, and they were all females, okay, and they happened to be little girls that I've known since they were like 3 or 4, that they've been in family therapy with me, so I know the families. I've known these children since they were little. All 3 of them at different times came in, and their parents brought them in because they had said to their parents, I'm not a girl and I'm not a boy, I'm non-binary.
Right.
And particularly the fathers were like, oh no, we're not going there, okay? The moms were like, okay. And those children, as I talked with them and dealt with them, okay, and it was helpful that I had known them, okay, because it was totally an issue of social contagion from internet, that was very popular. It's a trend. It is definitely a trend on social media. They had been watching social media. One of them was feeling like she didn't fit in with her friends anymore, so maybe that was the problem, why it was. But the reason it was so helpful for me as a clinician to have known them was most of the children I've worked with that may have issues with transgender issues, it showed way back when they were 2 years old and 3 years old. It doesn't pop up at 11 years old. It's something that moms and dad have viewed they didn't know what to do with, or that we'd seen and maybe not dealt with it the way best, but it's a very different presentation than when you get a 12 or 13-year-old that says, oh, this is what I'm going to be now. The true, I've worked with 2 children that are truly transgender or have gender identity issue, whatever we want to call it, okay? One was a girl and one was a boy. The little girl, from the time she was walking and being potty trained, and this is really interesting, she never would sit down. She always stood up to go potty. And I'd asked her to go to the bathroom, and I'd asked her mom about that. And I said, does she see her dad do that, or her brothers, or, where's this behavior coming from? And she said, we have no men in our family. She said, I'm a single mom. There's no boyfriend. She said she has done this since she started using the bathroom. She never liked long hair. She used to fight with her mom. She would go and get scissors and cut her hair when she was like 4 years old because she didn't like it, and her clothing. I mean, it was an ongoing thing, And what is really kind of interesting about this case, I got that case through CPS. They had bungled the case, and so they'd asked me to try to work through some stuff. The biological mother, was very understanding of what her daughter was experiencing, and she didn't have labels for it, and we weren't labeling. It was just like this little girl was uncomfortable with who she was, and we were trying to work with that. She was very comfortable with working with it. she was losing custody. She had her own issues in other areas. She was losing parental rights. So she did lose parental rights, and they took the little girl, and in the foster home they put the little girl, and it was foster to adopt. Okay, it was a fast track foster to adopt, and in that home, the little girl was told and carried through. She was not allowed to wear pants. She could only wear dresses. She was required to have pink hair ribbons in her hair every day. Yeah, and I do not know how that turned out. I would say probably not well. I mean, because I wasn't able to follow the case. But when we go to an extreme that way, without looking at maybe what is going on with the child, and medical interventions necessary, and sometimes not because of doing gender change or anything, but to find out what is going on with a child that's experiencing something like that has nothing to do with social contagion at all. You don't get that. You don't get that kind of reaction in a 3 and 4 year old from them being on the internet. Okay. Right. And the other one was a little boy I had, and it was way back when I was a preschool director. And this little boy was in our 4-year-old class, and he just couldn't be a boy. He just couldn't be. And no one knew what to do with him because this was a long time ago. But if he went to the play clothes section we had, he would only put the dresses, the hat. I mean, he had, and you could see it in him. He just craved it, and he had a funny walk, and he talked it. I mean, he just couldn't be a boy like the other boys, and he wasn't mean to them, and they weren't mean to him, but he had no place to relate to them. No place. And his father was this big burly guy that was a heavy equipment operator. I mean, I remember this so clearly. Heavy equipment operator, and mom was an at-home mom. They were worried because they were worried about when he started kindergarten. We were a private preschool, so we were able to kind of work with him and be concerned. They were concerned what was going to happen if they were like, how do we change his behavior when he entered public school? And that's a case I look at that was way before we didn't have social media, we didn't have computers. That's how old I am. That that was purely from inside of him. But I think what we're seeing now is, yes, it's true. There are kids that have hormone, gender issues, all of that going on, but it's a small percentage compared to what we're seeing in the general population and some other things moving on. Because if someone says, well, that never could exist, I haven't worked with children, because it does exist. Why and how and what we need to do with it is very varied, but those presentations are very different than the older children. So I got into the meat of this right away. Okay. Studies of the prevalence of transgender persons varies widely. And when I was looking up data for this, I put this in this way because it was amazing to me, depending on who was supplying the data of what the percentages were. So it goes from 0.4 per 100,000 to 23.6 per 100,000, which is a huge variance if you think about statistics at all. It's grown exponentially in the last few years. 2018 study suggests that when the media picked it up, that may have been part of the reason for the very sudden increase. Now, I'm not saying that this hasn't been going on for 10 years or something, but it's just like been a sudden increase. And this, I think, is really important for Minors Council to know. 40 to 45% of transgender or gender identity issue children have some type of psychiatric comorbidity. Okay,
What's the second word?
Comorbidity. They have depression, anxiety, social anxiety, eating disorders. That's a very high percentage within a population to have comorbidity with psychiatric disorders. And I think what's important to not get caught up in, because here's where the arguments start, this side and this side, is do they have those issues because they they're in a society where they have gender identity issues, or those issues exist and they're using gender identity as the issue rather than that issue? And I think the answer is it's chicken and egg. Every single case you work with, you have to look at it individually. I don't think, and the concern always is in mental health, in all fields, once something becomes a thing or a trend or big, we're going to start getting templates about when you see this is what you do and all. And this just is one of those issues we just cannot allow that. I mean, for mental health for children and for families, I just don't think we can. We can't say it never exists and we can't say it always exists. We have to look at it one by one. And I think that's where Minors Council is going to be very involved. Okay. Next one. I'm not going to go through everything I have on the slides because we have really more than we have time for. But all of you, we will be sending out the handouts so that you will have this. Another thing that I think is contributing to children questioning is the sex education curriculum has changed in our schools, and it's different. Okay, every district is different, so I can't tell you all of it, but like in Palm Springs Unified, in 5th grade, there is all the children, part of sex education is talking about, is it binary, or, what non-binary is, what that would feel like, what that is, what is queer, what is this, what is that. So it's brought into mainstream, into children that are not sexual yet, but are dealing with an issue that's probably beyond their emotional capacity or their developmental stage. Okay, the point that districts have done that with, I understand, is to try and stop bullying and prejudice. Okay, but again, we've got something new, so now we've got children that are dealing maybe with things that are over their head in order to not hurt children that are dealing with it, if that makes sense.
Well, and it was interesting to me because my oldest applied to college this year for UC and Cal State. They actually ask you how you identify.
Yes.
I was shocked, and I'm only 40.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah, no, that is now, that is on all applications. Mm-hmm. It's also for kindergarten.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you register your kid in school.
I've seen that for kindergarten for my daughter, but maybe.
Yeah, well, that was, I mean, maybe they haven't put it in, but that's where.
Well, and I could have ignored it too.
Yeah,
It's now going on passports, and it's now going on everywhere. I mean, I just
well,
got.
It's weird. And that's the thing, because right when you talk about if it matters for parents, because it's not, these issues matter for us as Minors Council, but they don't really matter for other things. But for some people, they do, and I think that's the position we have to have. I guess for me, what does it matter if you're binary or not for a passport? But that matters for some parents, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this does bring in, I think, all of us having to look at navigating in a culture that's different than what most of us grew up in, and looking at not. It's interesting because the very focus is of acceptance for the movement, but it's all about labels, which is very difficult because for me it's learning to try to work in a culture and not label and look at people as people, but that's not really what's coming towards us from mental health with this. So as you just said, it's absolutely true. It may not matter to you, but for some people, that becomes their identity, not just their identity sexually, but it's how they carry themselves out in the world.
Well, and it apparently, and I've only learned this on a recent case, it becomes sometimes the other side's way of doing a dig. So, for example, you had a man and a woman who have a child. They're in court over that child. Woman starts dating someone who's considered binary, and they have a new name. Because I don't know if that's typical or not.
Yes,
they have a
yes.
new name. And in the pleadings, the opposing party refers to them as their birth name, the new, and it sends the partner over the edge. And it could be that they're trying to dig at them, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be they're just
Don't know what else.
them,
Yeah.
Right. So.
Well, and that's a huge issue, and I know we're kind of going all over the place, but when you're dealing with, my experience has been mostly with middle schoolers. I have two active cases right now. When the parents have agreed and the child has said, okay, I'm no longer Linda, I'm now Leo. That I cannot tell you the fireworks that if you happen to say Linda instead of Leo, that the child, and it feels like to me some of the social media is training them to become inflamed and say, you're disrespecting me, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I have to say to them, it's like, sometimes we just forget. Sometimes dad just forgets, and sometimes mom just forgets because you've been Linda for 12 years, and sometimes we forget that it's now Leo. Well, if you really respected me and if you really cared, you would, and so not only are we, when we're dealing with this, because I think the hardest age really is the middle school age, okay? Because by the time they're in high school, they're pretty much off. They're, if that's, if they're going to start transitioning and stuff, they're pretty clear on it, and families, whether they accept it, don't accept it, it's kind of, it is what it is. But middle schoolers are the most difficult because, again, middle schoolers are just squirrely in how they think, their cognitions. They're not in the best place, I mean, for anything.
I got to tell you, I have my Minors Council kids laughing a lot. And one thing I could say to these kids is, you have no idea how many times my parents called my second husband by my first husband's name for probably 6 months. So you know what? Forgive people when they call you the wrong name. My husband did it, and you know what? You get used to it.
Yeah, but and that is such a nice way to diffuse it because
You have to.
because they get so focused. I mean, and emotional, and sometimes I'm like, let's take a breath here. You don't have to disown your mom because one time she said, said, do you want to go get your nails done? Or, because it comes down to, I want to say silly things, but they're not silly things because it comes down to things culturally that we just accept and think don't go around in a different way, and it's become this huge ordeal. Okay, so when you're dealing with middle schoolers, keep a sense of humor. And realize too, and here's the other thing that happens with middle schoolers during the pandemic. As I said, many of these children have depression, anxiety, social anxiety, okay? So many of them are very socially awkward. They and have been. They're very socially awkward. and they feel like they don't fit in because you know what? They don't. For whatever reason, because of depression, anxiety, gender issues, whatever, they don't fit in. So during pandemic, it worked for them. They were home. They didn't have to deal with kids and all, but they glued themselves to sites, and I think many of them, like the little girls I was talking about that, when their mom and dad said, nah, we're not going there because it really wasn't an issue. But they were on a site because their friends were on a site because that was a popular site for all of them to be on. Now, on that site, because I went on the site because I wanted to see what these kids are seeing, is it's presented to them like all social media, like this is the answer to all your problems. So there's I'll call them influencers, but they're kind of like superstars. Okay, young adults who transitioned from gender assigned at birth to a different gender or to non-binary or to whatever it is. And they give this wonderful, my life is wonderful now, this is terrific, and the children buy it 100%. They don't understand that that's a false, that is marketing. Okay, because they don't understand influencers or marketing. If you talk to middle schoolers just about stuff on games and clothing and all of that, they don't understand that influencers are just marketing. Okay, they don't get it. It's like, no, that's really the life they live. And it's like, no, it's really not, So, and a lot of those sites, I was, not all of them, but many of those sites will not allow posts to be posted of people who have started the process and decided that it's not working for them or not good. Yeah, they don't allow those posts because they do have an agenda. I mean, and so, but what the kids are seeing, they're not getting both sides. They don't hear, wow, sometimes this doesn't work out. They don't hear that. They only see it's wonderful, okay, which is not fair to the children, but nevertheless, that is what's happening.
The other thing I noticed, I use a word that somebody just give me a new word, but I try to talk to, you have so many people who are outliers. Give me a new word.
Yeah.
And they are, for a lot of different reasons. They just know they're a little different than the overall class for different reasons. But the trouble is that those people will then find it could be that, and the commonality is outlier, and then feeling better about being an outlier. And I think when they're in school, what I tell them to do is try to sit back and notice, because they're always there. Notice other kids who also feel a little uncomfortable, and try to get to know them. So I think that's part of the problem too,
Well, it's
a magnet for that.
Well, it is. Well, it's huge because middle schoolers need to belong.
Yeah, I know.
And if they don't belong in the in the norm, they're going to find any place they can to belong. And then what that means for them is then they need to truly belong there and follow that.
That's right.
And so and if that's true for a child, then there is good support. But if that's not, if the child's issue really is social anxiety as opposed to gender issues, then that's a problem. It's very confusing. Yeah, and those children don't have the ability to sort that through. And if you have as Minors Council, if you have warring parents, then the parents are not thinking it through. And so someone has to slow things down because this, from what I see, this is going to be it's just one more thing, like I said, for parents to use to draw the children on this side or this side. Okay. And I'm just going to go over this real quickly. Social contagion is not a new terminology. It has existed forever. And all social contagion is what we're talking about, is when you're in a group, whatever that group believes and whatever they do, that makes it okay. So if you're in that group or you want to belong to that group, you're going to accept whatever that group is about.
Sort of like being a gang member, huh?
It's the exact same thing. Same thing. It's the very same thing. It's social contagion. So this group does this, and if you don't belong here, and you don't belong here, and you don't belong here, but you think maybe I belong here, and this group says all of this is okay, okay, then that filters out into the general population like that's okay. And I'm not feeling comfortable at school. Maybe it's because I'm not really a girl or a boy, or and so that's social contagion, okay? And it's been around. I mean, you can think back to when we were kids. Think back to the 50s. All the boys had short hair, right? They wore, buzz cuts and straight leg jeans. And I was never a boy in the 50s, but I'm trying to remember. and that, okay?
They weren't around in the 50s.
I've seen pictures.
Okay, you've seen pictures. All right. So, but enter the 60s and the British invasion, and we have the Beatles with long hair. We have everyone with long hair. Suddenly, it was okay for boys to have long hair. That was social contagion. What had once been wrong was now okay because the group accepted it. Yeah, now we're back to long hair, short hair. Whatevers. Yeah, we're back. Okay. And so this is a little bit of a primer on how social media shapes our identity, because this doesn't work with just gender issues. This is about everything for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and you deal with it. If you're minors counsel, you're going to deal with that. Kids are socializing from the pandemic more and more online, okay? But during that time, what they missed was learning socialization skills that come from being in person, that you can't get from a screen. And you can't convince them that they can't get it. You cannot convince kids that they can't get it from the screen. So don't even go there.
I've tried.
Yeah. As a parent, yes.
Multiple teenagers.
Yeah. They just, no, Mom, no, you just don't get it. And you're like, I think I do get it. I think you don't, but yeah. So what they are not learning to read, and they don't learn to read body language, eye contact, how people are looking away, and there's something that happens. We're made to be, that's how we're made. We're made to be in contact with each other. Chemicals change when we're looking at people, when we get positive reactions, we get negative reactions. That affects us physiologically, and that doesn't happen when you're on a screen.
That's interesting. Let me just say, because sometimes I'll have my minor and a parent in my office at the same time, because I want to see their relationship when I talk to them about the other parent. And for instance, I had one recently where the mother said, "Oh no, I encourage her to go see her dad. In fact, it's really important that she gets what's going on over there." Those were her exact words. And after the conversation, I said to them, "Okay, now, what did you feel about how your mom talked about your dad today? Did you like it? And Mom, did you realize you said anything negative about Dad today?" "I did not."
Yeah.
So one of the things I always do is educate parents and kids about body language. I always do. And it's enlightening to most parents. Most parents don't realize they're doing it. Some, of course, do, but some don't realize it.
Yeah. Well, and it's important. But see, that's what our kids are missing out on.
Well, and so what's interesting along that line, the body language is what I've learned, because I have a 2-year-old, so he came up during this COVID mask thing.
Yeah.
He reads expressions differently because he read everyone through a mask as an infant
Wow.
That's right.
than my other children. And I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's different. And so we have the same issue when people are coming in, talking to us as minors council with their masks on, because you need to see the rest of the face
Right.
to really know what's going on.
Yeah. No, definitely. That it's an issue in therapy. Yeah. Let's see. And I thought this was really interesting because I hadn't thought about this before. One of the things that has come out of this is when kids went back to school, they were really intimidated about being back with their friends. I mean, most of them got over it. But part of that was when you're on social media, you have all the time in the world to decide how you want to say what you want to say, what you're going to say, what you're going to do. And in real life, it ain't so. Right now, this is what we're doing, and kids, and that's intimidating because suddenly they realized they had to be themselves. And I think for a lot of kids, they didn't know who themselves were any longer. They lost some of that. And physical looks is huge with middle schoolers and high schoolers. And on social media, do you ever look bad? No, because you never post that picture that you weren't looking good in, okay? In real life, when people are taking pictures of you at school at lunch and going, hey, look at you, ha, you got food in your teeth, okay? Not everything is picture perfect, and kids are having trouble dealing with that. Okay, and so that contributes to social anxiety, to wanting to stay home, and just contributes to all of this. Okay. Do middle schoolers and high schoolers believe that everyone is more perfect than them? Yep. When you talk to them, they do. Doesn't matter. As a grandmother, I tell my grandchildren, oh, you're the most wonderful, you're the best ballerina, you're this, and like, yeah, grandma. Yeah, well, you are. Peer acceptance is primary for adolescents. Remember that. They will do about anything, unfortunately, for acceptance. Let's see. This is important. The gap between their authentic self and presented self becomes problematic. They actually, after a pandemic, I think many of them didn't know how to go back and be themselves with their peers. They didn't know how to do it because they'd been online. I mean, the healthier ones had been online with their friends and stuff, not the child that Carol Bayer and I were talking about where they're just isolated, but they really had project one part of themselves, but then you can't always be a false self. So when you're at school, your real self comes out, and that was really mental health issues very difficult for them. Okay, yeah, I know we gotta, let's see. How about Carol? I'm gonna fast forward through this. You talk a little bit about the legal end of medical stuff.
Well, last night I had a crisis at home, so I had to call on Natalie. Natalie, can you research this for me? And she started texting me all this stuff right into the night, and it was wonderful. I came in this morning and printed it out. But I don't have a lot to say except that I remember back when the very first case of equal rights was decided. I seem to remember that it was a girls' baseball team. They were given the same rights in high school to play as boys. And I mean, that's probably when I was a young adult. And as time has gone by, I've had friends who are gay, and they came to me and said, we're never going to have gay marriage. And I'm not political one side or the other. And I said, I'm kind of thinking, because back when that equal rights, case was decided, I kind of think you're going to get there, because the way an attorney looks at something is like, well, they're going to have to take that ruling and move from issue to issue to issue to issue. So now we've moved with that ruling to the issue of legal rights for lesbian and gay and bisexual and transgender youth. And I printed off some of the things that Natalie sent me last night, and I will have a copy for everybody that's here. If you take this class online, you will get a copy of each one of these things too. But the main one that I have gone through and looked at is National Center for Lesbian Rights. And it's it probably nothing new to me, but I just want to read a couple of things because this goes back to foster care rights. And I want to say it's not only legal rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, but it's also other children who are in foster care. It's their rights too. And I can't remember for the life of me the name of the kids that were taken from that really abusive home. There were like 7 or 8 or Turpin.
Yeah.
There's an investigation going on because of the way they were treated in foster care. The laws there are no different than what I'm going to share with you about gay and lesbian kids. Care providers, including foster care, are required to protect foster children from harms that may exist outside the home, not just in the foster care home. So foster parents are required to deal with harassment and discrimination at school. So when you take on a role as minors counsel of really any child now, when you look at the Turpins, when you look at gay and lesbian kids, when you look at biracial kids, when you look at kids, that could have come from Afghanistan and have, come into the country and are being harassed at school. If you're appointed minors counsel on these cases, you have a lot of responsibility. You have to work if they're in foster care, and I've had cases where my kids were in foster care. You really have to make sure that the foster parents are aware of their obligations, because this article talks about how they must be educated. It's not my duty to educate them, but they have to be educated by the system before they're allowed to become foster care providers. But then when we represent the child, we better see if something is not okay, because we're appointed, to determine what's in the child's best interest for some reason. The placing, it's talking about the agency that arranged the placement bears a huge responsibility, a huge legal responsibility. It's just, and I want to say, this only applies to gay and lesbian kids, but honestly and truly, there's nothing that I'm reading here that only applies to them. Appropriate medical and mental health care, the right to receive it when you're a foster child, they're saying it applies to gay and lesbian kids. It applies to every kid in foster care. Welfare agency cannot permit providers to ignore the instructions of a transgender youth treating physician or otherwise choose not to provide the youth with necessary health care. That applies to every child in foster care. So I think this article is really good in confirming that for the gay and lesbian population, that these kids are entitled to this, but I don't see anything different in their rights, frankly, than in any other child. It says child welfare professionals should not automatically place gay and lesbian youth in congregate care settings, but rather should make individual placement decisions in line with the youth's permanency goals. So there we come back to, should this child have been placed in a home where they made her wear or him wear, I don't know what he ended up, dresses with pink ribbons. It's something that we are now learning has to be considered. And at what age does the child have a big say? 3? Probably not. But if you observe the child like you did, the child's going to have influence if you're if you recognize, what's happening and what's going on in that child's life. Diana said to me today, well, kids in school can now not they can sign papers so that their parents can't find out about their activities at school, that they belong to a gay and lesbian society or something else. But I don't know if you knew that before that, kids could sign documents their parents couldn't find out about other stuff.
Well, we have a law here in California. California is special. We have some laws that other places don't. That children, and Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 12 and up. If they they can seek counseling on their own for sexual.
That makes sense. Because
yeah.
it's the same when they change their chart to be able to access for it. It's 12.
Yeah,
That's
age
right.
12. That if they can find a provider who will give them services for free, because parents, that provider cannot tell the parents what those parents do not have access to that child's chart for those issues. Okay?
Actually, it's for any issue, such as, is my child on birth control,
well,
or that kind of stuff.
It's all issues. Yeah.
It's a big issue in California, and you're welcome. Go ahead and say something.
We have a lot of inconsistencies
We do.
in California. I mean, you're letting kids make decisions at 12 years old, like get a restraining order, like the things you're talking about right now, that they're making when they are not legally competent to make decisions, because they don't reach legal competency to age 18.
Correct.
And so we're letting kids who cannot legally be sexually intimate, for example, we're letting them make decisions about their sexual identity and what steps to take with regard to that, or about birth control, or any of those things. We've got a double standard here. I think that really, it troubles me. It's what we've got, but it troubles me. We're letting kids who are not competent to make legal decisions make decisions like this.
Well, and it makes for a lot of problems within a family. Think how you feel as a parent if you find out, because my experience has been more often than not, parents find out that your child has been on birth control given by a doctor without your permission. Think how you feel as a parent. And that's legal. Or that your child was raped, didn't tell you, and went and got services for being raped and didn't tell you, because they cannot let you know. So, I mean, it makes for a lot of family issues.
It does, but at least in our world, when that child comes in, part of the treatment is helping them share it with their parents and the appropriate people to help support them.
Yeah, because it's very isolating. But we also, do you want to talk about that? We're the only state in the union that mandates that.
Go ahead.
Okay, California. And I didn't get all the details because I was leaving this part for Carol. California is the first state and the only state in the union that has passed legislation for the that the state must provide hormone changing therapy for youth in the foster care system if requested.
How do they determine it? Do you know how they determine if it's appropriate?
No, I don't. I don't, because that's,
So the child over 12 can request it?
Well, I don't know all the
That'd be
intricacies,
scary.
but we are the first state that has that.
Do you know, Carol, at all about in terms of do the parental rights have to
Right,
be terminated?
right.
Where does
No,
all that
well,
lie?
I don't know.
definition
She'll
of
do that research, won't you, Carol?
No, I can tell you a little bit. If somebody is in foster care, the parents' parental rights not necessarily are terminated. They might be in a program. I don't even know what the parents' parental rights are when their rights have not been terminated.
Okay.
But they most frequently have been appointed with Minors Counsel.
Yes.
So Minors Counsel, and I have never done it in the juvenile system. I don't have good experience dealing with Minors Counsel and juvenile system, because the ones I have met and dealt with as a parent attorney Many of the minors council attorneys have never even met their clients. They have an investigator who will interview them once, and that's their entire contact. So when it comes to an issue like this, if I were a parent whose rights had not been terminated, I would be on the juvenile court to make sure that minors counsel is doing their job. Because minors counsel in juvenile court is very different than what we do in family law court. Very, very, very different. So to answer your question, they have minors counsel. Minors counsel should be talking to the physician. And the court should know what's going on because there's minors counsel to report to the court. And if all of this is not being done, the placement agency is then responsible.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, that's the law. So, if parental rights are terminated, who can sue the placement agency? And if they're not terminated, of course, the parents would continue to have that right.
There is some kind of reunification program.
Yeah,
Right, correct. So I don't have the answer for you, but if I were a parent who hadn't lost parental rights, I would certainly be on that issue. And if I were minors counsel in juvenile court, I would really be involved in that issue because, like we're all saying, a 12-year-old has no idea what kind of a person they're going to be when they're 20.
Right.
They don't have any idea what they're going to be when they're 18, when they can make a legal decision. So my job as minors counsel today, not for a child in foster care, but is to work with my kids wherever they are at whatever the age they are. And I really spend a lot of time talking to my kids, doing things with my kids. I habitually visit them at each parent's home. I mean, I really get to know my kids. I don't just say what they want me to say because I look for the things you're talking about. Are they saying that only because they're saying it? Or are they saying it because somebody in the family can tell me they've been like that all their lives? Minors counsel has a big job. We have a real duty to our kids. And it's kind of frustrating to me when I put a lot of time in and I have a judicial officer who doesn't learn what I've learned about this and they just sort of throw it away. And we've had, and I don't mean to go there, but we've had big discussions, with Judge Wells over the years with this, and we've had a lot of judicial officers attend these. But a lot of the final decisions have to come down to judicial officers, whether they're educated or not. And it's and you work with the court system, and you have judicial officers who are not highly educated. And I wish we could find a way, and I've said this many, many times, in the state system to get every judicial officer who works in family law educated about all this stuff because it's so important about children. It's not just mom and dad want custody. That's not, the greatest part of these kids' lives sometimes. And it is a great part of it. But helping to have a child work through all that and helping the parents get the child there is my main focus as minors counsel. And I can't always do that because I don't have cooperative families all the time. But I know that's Virginia's aim because I've had cases where she's minors counsel. And I just think that whether we're working with gay and lesbian kids or whether we're working with transgender kids or whether we're working with whatever, Afghan kids or whatever, we need to get to know them. We need to get to know their needs. And I think it's extremely important that, of course, we know the law because the law is different from California to another state. And I have actually had cases transfer, and I've had orders made that gave parents who lived in a different state custody of a child. And so all the stuff we're talking about today about California law and California schools and California placement may not apply once our child moves somewhere else. So we have to be really educated.
Yeah, and I'm going to move us because I know our time, but knowing what state and what the law is really important. There's 13 states in the union that will not allow a child to have any hormone therapy, parental consent or none, before the age of 18. So we go from here to here. We don't have any consistency in how state legislatures are looking at it, or we have nothing standardized, which is what's best for children. We just don't have that yet in this area. So it's a new area for everyone to be working with. I am not.
We only had a half hour, so.
Okay, I'm not. Yeah, I know. I'm not. It
I'm
was
just relishing the fact that you guys are the ones going overtime.
I know.
We will get back at you for that. I am not going to go over terminology with you guys. I have several pages of it. It's interesting. I hope when you get your handouts, you will go through it. Maybe not so much as for you guys, but for parents, if you're trying to educate them, or other people you're trying to educate, because kids are very, very, they're very educated in this, and they will throw terms out and everything, and you need to you kind of need to know what they're talking about.
And you need to let the judge know. I've had a couple of cases where the poor judge, I felt so sorry for him, kept stumbling over he or she or, and I felt so bad for him. And so, it's nice to put